The galaxy had been quiet for centuries. For most, the silence was comforting. The great wars were long over, the empires had stabilized, and trade routes flowed between stars like rivers of light. But in that silence, hidden deep in history, there was one word that no one dared to speak aloud: humanity. They were a memory, a shadow told in whispers. The ancient archives of alien empires described them as relentless, unpredictable, and dangerous beyond measure. No one had seen a human ship in hundreds of years. Some claimed they were extinct. Others believed they had fled into the dark, never to return. The galaxy had begun to relax, believing the nightmare was over, until the day a single warship appeared. It was not announced. It was not tracked by any known sensor. It simply arrived, slipping into a busy star sector with the silence of a ghost. The ship was colossal, far larger than most modern dreadnoughts, its black hull drinking the starlight around it. No banners, no colors, no signals, just a silent shadow drifting through space, its presence pressing like a weight on every nearby vessel. The first ships to spot it were merchant freighters. Their captains froze when their scanners picked up the strange design. They reported its silhouette to the nearest station, and within hours the image had spread across half the galaxy. The outline was unmistakable: an old human warship. Panic spread like fire. The smaller alien ships gave it distance, but they did not run. They knew the stories. Running from a human warship was useless. Better to wait, to watch, to hope. Larger fleets scrambled, their admirals ordering emergency meetings. Was this real? Could it be a trick? The archives had described these warships as floating nightmares, built to withstand entire armadas. But how could one still exist? On the edge of the star system, a research vessel approached to scan it closer. The scientists on board whispered in fear as their instruments confirmed what their eyes already told them. The ship's weapons were silent but alive. Its systems were ancient, yet still powerful enough to bend space around it. One scientist swore she felt the ship watching them, though no signal had been sent. And still the warship said nothing. For 3 days, it drifted in silence. Merchant fleets rerouted, planets locked down, and the Galactic Council gathered in emergency session. The fear was not only in the ship itself, but in what it meant. If one human warship had survived, how many more were hidden? If this was a messenger, what message did it carry? The council debated endlessly. Some demanded immediate destruction. Others warned against firing first. The memories of old battles burned too clearly. Every empire had once fought humans. Every empire had once bled against them. And every empire remembered one terrifying fact: humanity did not fight to win. They fought to end. Meanwhile, civilians across the stars felt the weight of dread. Children asked their parents if the humans were coming back. Old veterans drank in silence, remembering battlefields where human soldiers fought without fear, without mercy. Priests declared omens, calling it the return of the forgotten predators. Traders raised prices, convinced war was coming, and still the warship drifted. On the 4th day, something changed. The warship moved just slightly, its engines glowing faintly for the first time. The movement was not aggressive. It did not turn its weapons on anyone. But that single shift was enough to send fleets into full alert. Dozens of ships locked their targeting systems, ready to fire at the slightest provocation. But they did not fire, because they all remembered the old stories, the stories of fleets that had fired first and never survived to fire again. The warship slowed again, then held position near the center of the system. To the watching eyes of billions, it felt like a deliberate gesture, as if it wanted to be seen, as if it wanted the galaxy to remember. Admiral Sarek of the Vayari Empire, who had fought in the last human war centuries ago, was summoned to speak before the council. His voice trembled as he recalled the old battles. One human warship, he said, was never alone. If you see one, others are near. If this ship has come, it is not by accident. They waited. They watched. And now they want us to see. The chamber fell silent. The counselors realized the truth at the same time. The silence of the warship was not weakness. It was power. It was a reminder of patience, of control. The humans did not rush, did not shout, did not declare. They simply arrived and waited, letting fear do the work for them. And across the galaxy, the fear grew. Some called for surrender before a war even began. Others prepared weapons, desperate to show strength. But no one could escape the same thought echoing in their minds: if this was only the beginning, what would come next? On the fifth day, the warship's hull lights flared once, just once. A silent pulse of white light that spread across the system like a ripple in water. It carried no words, no translation. But to those who saw it, it felt like a warning. The galaxy trembled. Humanity's warship had arrived, and it was only the start. The news of the warship spread like fire across every corner of the galaxy. Entire star systems froze in dread, their leaders rushing into secret meetings, their citizens whispering about a nightmare that had returned. The word human was spoken again, not as history, but as present danger. The Galactic Council, the most powerful assembly in known space, gathered on the capital world of Deros Prime. The chamber was filled with light from thousands of holoscreens, each showing the same silent black warship floating in the sector where it had first appeared. Every delegate who entered the chamber carried the same fear in their eyes. The High Speaker of the Council opened the session with a voice that trembled, despite his attempts at calm. The warship has not fired, but its silence is more dangerous than any weapon. We must decide how to respond before panic consumes the galaxy. The room erupted at once. Some shouted for immediate destruction. Others begged for caution. The voices overlapped like crashing waves. Admiral Torvek of the Draal Empire, a tall reptilian figure scarred from past battles, slammed his claw against the table. "Strike first," he roared. "Destroy it before more appear. You all know the legends. 1 warship today means 10 tomorrow. If we wait, we die." Across the chamber, Councillor Eshan of the Arakai Confederacy rose slowly, her silver skin glinting under the lights. Her people had suffered greatly in the last human war. She shook her head. "Attack, you fool. We tried that centuries ago. Entire fleets vanished, entire worlds burned. Do you think 1 ship alone cannot defend itself? You will doom us all if you strike first." The chamber fell into furious debate. Delegates pointed to old records. Archives filled with footage of humans fighting like demons, their ships tearing through enemy lines, their soldiers refusing to surrender even in hopeless battles. The scars of those wars were carved into the memories of every species represented in the council. And then the old veterans were called in. One by one, survivors of the last war entered the chamber. Their voices shook, their bodies bent with age, but their words carried a weight stronger than any threat. An old warrior of the Kar Dominion, blind in one eye, stepped forward. "I fought at the siege of Orion Gate," he rasped. "We outnumbered them 10 to 1. Our fleets had the advantage of position. They still broke us. Not with numbers, not with technology. With will, with patience. Humans fight as if death itself fears them." Another, a frail ex-admiral from the Trellari Union, spoke with bitterness. "You think this ship is alone? You think it came without purpose? If you see 1 human ship, there are always more. They do not reveal themselves unless they already know the outcome." The council chamber grew cold. The delegates exchanged fearful glances. For the first time in centuries, they all felt powerless. In the shadows of the chamber, smaller species whispered to one another. Some saw opportunity. For ages, they had lived under the rule of stronger empires, forced to pay tribute, forced to remain weak. Now the return of humanity promised change. If the humans chose allies, who would they protect? Who would rise with them? The great empires noticed these whispers and grew angry. But their anger only proved the truth. Humanity's return had already begun to fracture the galaxy. At last, the High Speaker raised his hands for silence. "We cannot act blindly," he declared. "We must know what this ship wants. Until it speaks, we will hold our fire." The decision did not end the fear. If anything, it deepened it. Waiting meant every passing hour was a knife pressed against their throats. Entire populations demanded answers. Civil unrest grew on worlds where citizens believed war was coming. Fleets hovered in orbit, weapons armed, crews trembling with nerves. And still the warship remained silent. Admiral Torvek spat in frustration. "They are playing with us. Do you not see? This is their weapon. Not lasers, not missiles. Fear itself." Eshan answered quietly. "And it is working." The council dismissed the assembly in uneasy silence. Orders were sent across the galaxy, prepare for anything. Armies began to mobilize, war factories ignited again after centuries of peace, and spies were dispatched to search for any trace of hidden human colonies. But deep down, in the minds of every leader present, one thought burned brighter than all others. If this was only the beginning, what would follow? And so the galaxy waited, just like the humans. For days the galaxy waited, The silent warship hung in space like a shadow that refused to move. Alien fleets surrounded it at a distance, weapons armed but fingers frozen on the triggers. On every world, on every station, people stared at the hollow screen showing the same endless image. A black ship, alive yet silent, daring the galaxy to make the first move. On the seventh day, the silence broke. It was not a weapon. It was not an attack. It was a signal, one single transmission that reached every star system at the same time. No empire was spared. No ship was missed. Across billions of worlds, the same voice spoke in the ancient human tongue, translated instantly by every listening machine. We waited. We watched. Now we decide. The words were short, but the effect was catastrophic. In the council chambers, delegates froze in their seats. In the military fleets, crews trembled, staring at each other in shock. On civilian worlds, riots began as people screamed that the humans had returned for vengeance. The message carried no threat, no order, no demand, yet its weight was heavier than 1,000 declarations of war. Galactic leaders demanded to know what decision the humans meant. Decide what? To forgive, to punish, to conquer? Every empire had its own guilty memory, its own blood-stained history with humanity. None of them could imagine mercy. The warship pulsed with light after the broadcast. Slowly, one by one, long dormant satellites across the galaxy reactivated. They were old human devices, hidden and forgotten, their signals buried under centuries of silence. Now they lit up like stars, showing proof that the humans had never truly vanished. They had been listening, watching, waiting for the right moment. Entire empires reeled in horror. If the humans had left behind a network that still worked, what else had they left? Weapons, fleets, colonies hidden in the dark? On the capital world of Deros Prime, the council held emergency session again. Admiral Torvek, his reptilian eyes burning with anger, slammed his claw against the table. They mock us. They show us how blind we have been. Do you not understand? They were never gone. They were here watching us like hunters watching prey, Counselor Ishan whispered almost too softly to be heard. And now the prey realizes it is still trapped. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some leaders demanded immediate surrender, hoping to save their people. Others argued that humanity's silence was only a bluff. Still others whispered of rebellion, if humans returned. Perhaps the smaller species would rise with them and overthrow the great empires that had ruled for too long. But above all the shouting, the same truth grew stronger. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy could only wait for their judgment. In the outer systems, things turned worse. On the mining world of Karos, workers abandoned their posts, believing humans would soon take everything. On the trade station of Orovon, smugglers began selling human artifacts at impossible prices, claiming they were symbols of protection. On the war-torn planet of Sulan, rebels painted human war symbols on their armor, declaring that the old predators had returned to fight beside them. Fear was no longer confined to leaders. It spread into the blood of entire populations. Meanwhile, the warship itself remained calm, drifting with the same terrible patience. Its engines glowed faintly, its weapons silent but awake. To the fleet surrounding it, it felt less like a machine and more like a predator that had chosen not to strike. Yet the crews of those fleets knew a single mistake. A single shot could awaken something none of them could stop. Then, on the 10th day, the warship broadcast again. This time only one word, remember. No explanation, no demands, just that single command, and the galaxy did remember. The veterans remembered the old wars, the terror of human fleets that fought against impossible odds. The civilians remembered the stories their ancestors had told, stories of humans who burned entire armadas, who fought until their last breath. The council remembered the scars carved into their homeworlds, scars that never healed. But most of all, they remembered what made humanity different. It was not only their weapons, not only their technology, it was their patience, their refusal to break, their will that could not be crushed, and now that patience had ended, the galaxy trembled. Empires prepared armies, fleets armed their cannons, but all of it felt useless. For the first time in centuries, every ruler realized they were no longer in control. The humans had returned, and the galaxy was only a stage for their decision. The warship drifted in silence once more, its message delivered. The stars seemed darker now, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Billions of eyes turned upward, waiting for the next signal, the next word, The next strike. The humans had spoken, and the galaxy could only tremble. The galaxy could not endure silence forever. The human warship had spoken only 2 times, yet those few words were enough to bring chaos. Armies were mobilized, fleets gathered, and populations trembled. But fear alone cannot hold back pride, and pride is what doomed the first empire that tried to challenge the ship. The core Dominion, an aggressive warlike species, refused to live in terror. Their emperor declared in a broadcast seen across 100 systems, "We will not kneel before a ghost of history. We will remind this warship who rules the stars." His voice was strong, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Within days, a mighty fleet was assembled, 300 war cruisers, 50 dreadnoughts, and countless smaller escorts. It was one of the largest single military gatherings in recent times. Citizens across the galaxy watched with a mix of hope and dread. Some prayed the core would succeed. Others whispered that this would be their doom. The fleet jumped into the star system where the human warship drifted. Their arrival shook space, hundreds of ships cutting through the void in perfect formation. The core admiral, proud and defiant, gave the order at once. Target the human relic. Fire all weapons. The galaxy held its breath. Thousands of beams, missiles, and energy lances erupted at once, turning the darkness of space into a storm of light. Explosions filled the void, the kind of barrage that could level an entire planet. For minutes, the core fleet poured their fury onto the silent ship, determined to erase it from existence. And then the fire faded. The human warship remained. Its black hull glowed faintly, its shield shimmering like ripples of water. There were no scars, no damage, no sign of weakness. It had endured the storm as if it were nothing more than rain. On every ship in the core fleet, silence fell. Crews stared in disbelief. Their admiral shouted for another volley, but his voice trembled. Again, the storm of weapons lit the void. Again, the warship stood untouched. Then, for the first time, the warship moved. It did not turn to flee. It did not unleash a barrage of missiles. Instead, its vast hull began to glow with white lines, patterns of light spreading like veins across its surface. The galaxy had seen this before in the old wars, right before human ships released their deadliest weapons. One beam erupted. Only one. It was not wide, not wild. It was a single line of concentrated light, silent and cold. It cut across the void like a blade through glass. And half the core fleet vanished. The beam carved through their armada as if it were paper, tearing ships apart in silence. Hundreds of vessels crumbled, breaking into fragments that scattered like dust. Entire crews were gone in seconds, millions of lives erased without even time for a scream. The other half of the fleet broke. Ships turned in panic, abandoning formation. The admiral shouted for them to hold, but no one listened. Discipline collapsed. Fear consumed them all. The warship did not pursue. It fired only once, then drifted back into silence. The destroyed ships floated as burning wrecks, a graveyard that glowed in the dark. Survivors fled into hyperspace, carrying the story with them. The galaxy heard that story within hours. Everyone now understood what had been proven. One human warship was enough to destroy an empire's pride. One strike was enough to remind the galaxy why humanity had once been feared above all. On distant worlds, riots broke out again. Some celebrated, declaring the humans invincible. Others despaired, believing no one could stand against them. The council met in panic, unable to agree on a single course. Admiral Torvek, his scales pale with dread, spoke in a broken voice. "You see? They did not fight a war. They did not waste their strength. They gave us one strike, just one, to show us what we already knew. If they had wanted, the core fleet would not exist at all. They chose to let survivors escape. They chose to let the story spread." The counselors shivered. The humans had not only destroyed ships, they had destroyed hope. By letting survivors flee, they turned fear into a weapon stronger than fleets. On the ruined edge of the star system, the warship drifted once more, its black hull silent, its lights fading back into stillness. To those who watched, it felt alive, not like a machine but like a predator that had tested its claws and was satisfied. For now, the galaxy understood the lesson. The humans did not need armies. They did not need allies. Their patience was enough, and when patience ended, one strike was all it took. The warship had spoken without words, and the galaxy trembled. The destruction of the core Dominion fleet changed everything. In one strike, The human warship had proven what legends only whispered. The galaxy was no longer divided by borders or trade. It was united by fear. Every empire felt the same chill. If one ship could destroy hundreds, what could a fleet do? And worse, if the humans had been watching all along, then how much did they already know? Secrets, weaknesses, the cracks between empires, no one could hide from them. On distant colonies, whispers spread faster than light. Some said the warship was a messenger. Others said it was only a scout, and the real armada waited beyond the edge of the galaxy. Rumors spoke of human worlds hidden in the dark, untouched, patient, raising generations of warriors for the day of return. The Galactic Council met once more, this time not in anger, but in despair. The chamber was silent, the delegates unable to look each other in the eyes. The High Speaker finally broke the silence with words heavy as stone. We cannot destroy them. We cannot command them. We cannot escape them. The humans have already chosen the battlefield, and it is not space, it is fear. And we are losing. No one argued. Meanwhile, across the stars, something began to shift. The small species, long enslaved and controlled by great empires, lifted their heads. For centuries, they had been forced to obey. Their fleets dismantled, their voices silenced. But now they saw an opening. The humans had returned, and with them came the chance to break chains. On the mining moon of Valros, slaves painted human symbols on their walls and declared themselves free. On the trade station of Euro Prime, oppressed merchants shouted in the streets, "The humans will protect us." And on the war-torn world of Sulan, rebels raised human banners, believing the predators would fight beside them. The galaxy began to fracture, not because the humans attacked, but because their shadow alone broke the balance of power. And still, the warship waited. It did not move to claim territory. It did not strike again. It only drifted, letting the galaxy consume itself with panic. The survivors of the core fleet spread their story, showing images of burning ships cut in half, of entire squadrons erased in a single breath. No propaganda could erase those images. No empire could silence the truth. On the 12th day, the warship spoke again. Its voice carried to every world, every ship, every soul. We do not return to rule. We return to remind. The words were calm, but they cut deeper than any weapon. What did they mean? Remind of what? Some said it was a warning, that humanity was showing the galaxy the price of arrogance. Others believed it was a promise that humans would not conquer, but they would never again be ignored. The council begged for more answers, but the warship gave none. Instead, its engines began to glow. Slowly, the massive ship turned, its bow facing the deeper void beyond the galactic rim. The sight was terrifying. Was it leaving? Or was it leading? Billions watched as the warship's engines flared brighter, preparing for a jump. Every world held its breath, and just before it vanished, one final transmission echoed across the stars. This is not the end. This is the beginning. And then it was gone. Silence returned to the galaxy, but it was not the same silence as before. It was heavier, darker, filled with unease, because the warship had left wreckage behind, not just of ships, but of certainty. The galaxy could never again believe humans were gone. On every world, people looked to the skies differently. Children whispered the word human with awe and fear. Soldiers trained with a new shadow over their hearts. Rulers tightened their grip, afraid their subjects would rebel under the promise of humanity's return. In the void beyond the rim, no one knew where the warship had gone. Was it seeking allies? Was it returning to a hidden empire? Or was it only the first of many? No answers came. Only silence, but the galaxy remembered the message. They remembered the patience. They remembered the single strike that shattered an empire, and they trembled, because they understood the truth. Humanity had never died. Humanity had only waited, and now humanity had returned.